It's PLB with MLB News back with another video. Today's video is going to be the best MLB player from each team. One player from each team. I did the most underrated player from each team, my favorite player from each team, the most overrated player from each team. I think it's time that I do best MLB player from each team. So if you like this kind of content on the channel, like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you will get notified when I upload and you will be one of the first ones to watch the video. So let's go ahead and get into this video. Starting off with the Atlanta Braves. Obviously you could put Ronald Acuna Jr. on this list, but that is not what I went with on this one, and I went with Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman is the best first baseman in the major leagues. You can obviously make an argument for Paul Goldschmidt, but I think the best first baseman in the major leagues is Freddie Freeman. In the future, obviously, it will be Ronald Acuna as their best player, but I'm going to go with Freddie Freeman for right now. Next for the Phillies, in my opinion, is JT Realmuto. He is the best catcher in baseball. Obviously, Yasmani Grandal is really good too, but he's the best catcher in baseball, and I think he is better than Bryce Harper right now. Next is the Mets, and this is obviously Jacob deGrom. I think he is possibly a top 15 player in baseball, the best pitcher in baseball. He's won 2 straight Cy Youngs in the NL. He's really good, and it sucks that he's in the NL East division, but yeah. Next one for the Nationals. Obviously, you could put Max Scherzer on this list, even Steven Strasburg. You can go with that. But I think the obvious choice here is Juan Soto. He is going to be a pain in the butt for the Braves for years to come. Next, for the Marlins. This was a tough one to choose. They do have a couple good players on that team. But I went with Jonathan Villar, who had a breakout season in 2019 with the Baltimore Orioles. I think he could have another great season in 2020 and possibly be traded at the trade deadline if there is a trade deadline. Next, let's go ahead and go to the NL Central. Cubs, Chris Bryant. Obviously, you could put Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, but I think the clear and obvious choice is Chris Bryant. Next, for the Cardinals, in my opinion, is Paul Goldschmidt. I think this is also pretty obvious. You can make the case for Jack Flaherty, but I think the obvious choice is Paul Goldschmidt. I think he will have a bounce-back 2020 season, and I think he could be fighting for that NL MVP. Next, for the Cincinnati Reds, Eugenio Suarez. A few years ago, it obviously would have been Joey Votto, but the last few years, he's not been very good. You obviously could probably go with Nicholas Castellanos here too, but I went with Eugenio Suarez, who I think is one of the more underrated players in baseball, just because he has been on a bad team the last few years. I think he'll be on a better team in 2020. Next, for the Brewers, Christian Yelich. I think this one's pretty obvious. He's the second or third best player in baseball. I think third, in my opinion, Mookie Betts number 2, and Mike Trout number 1, obviously. Next, for the Pirates, I think this one's pretty easy. Josh Bell. He's definitely the best player on the Pirates because they are a bad team. Next, for the Dodgers, obviously they have Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts, which is a tough decision who their best player is. But I'm going to go with the Mookie Betts for this video. I think Mookie Betts might only spend a season there, and that means Cody Bellinger would be the best player on pretty much any team besides the Angels. He would be the best player on. Next, for the Diamondbacks, I feel like this one's kind of an obvious choice too. You could obviously argue Madison Bumgarner, but I went with Ketel Marte, who had a breakout season in 2019. I think he will have another really good season in 2020. Next one, for the Padres. Obviously, you could argue Manny Machado, but I went with Fernando Tatis. I think he's going to be good for years to come, and I think Manny Machado is just not that great anymore. I mean, since he went to the Padres, he's just not had a great 2 years. Or 1 year, I mean. Rockies, Nolan Arenado. This one's pretty obvious. In my opinion, he's a top 5 player in baseball. Really good third baseman. Trevor Story's also really good. Next for the Giants, this one's kind of tough because that is a terrible team, but Mike Yastrzemski's obviously their best player in my opinion. Last year it would have been Kevin Pillar or Madison Bumgarner. I probably would have went with Madison Bumgarner last year or Kevin Pillar. But this year I'm going to go with Mike Yastrzemski. They lost Kevin Pillar in free agency. They lost Madison Bumgarner in free agency. Buster Posey's not that good anymore. Brandon Belt, same. Brandon Crawford, same. Evan Longoria, same. Next, let's go ahead and move to the AL East. We will start with Yankees Garrett Cole. I think this one's pretty obvious. They picked him up in the offseason, and he's a really good player. The second best pitcher in baseball, in my opinion. Rays, Austin Meadows. I would have probably said Tommy Pham last year. But now that Tommy Pham was traded to the Padres, I think the obvious choice here is Austin Meadows. Next for the Red Sox, they've got a lot of good players on that team. It obviously would have been Mookie Betts if he still is on their roster. I went with Alexander Bogaerts. I think you could also argue Rafael Devers. Possibly even J.D. Martinez. Andrew Benintendi also. Lots of good players on that team, but I went with Alexander Bogaerts. Next for the Blue Jays, obviously Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. could be on here. Also, Kevin Biggio could be. But I went with Hyun-Jin Ryu, who was the best pitcher, one of the better pitchers in baseball in 2019. I think he will have another great season with the Blue Jays in 2020 if there is a season. Next for the Orioles, I think this one's pretty obvious too. Trey Mancini, obviously a terrible team. It sucks for Trey Mancini that he's on a terrible team, like the Orioles. Indians, I think this is pretty obvious. Francisco Lindor. I did a video that was 7 Francisco Lindor trades that actually could happen in the 2020 season. If you have not watched that video yet, link in the description below to that. Next, for the White Sox, Yoan Moncada. Obviously, you could argue Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson. But Tim Anderson, the batting champion, he led in batting average in the MLB in 2019. But I went with Yoan Moncada, who had a breakout 2019 season, and I think he'll have another great season in 2020. Next, Twins, Josh Donaldson. You could have picked Max Kepler, maybe even Mitch Garver, maybe even Jose Barrios, but I went with Josh Donaldson, who is in his first year with the Twins. Next, Royals, Whit Merrifield. Whit Merrifield, I think, is one of the more underrated players in baseball. The reason why I think he gets underrated is because of the team he's on, which is the Royals. Next, Tigers, Nico Goodrum. Obviously, you could go with Miguel Cabrera, but I think he's not that good anymore, and I'm going to go with Nico Goodrum. Next, Angels, Mike Trout. Obvious. Obviously, Anthony Rendon's really good, too. Astros, Alex Bregman. Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, too. Well, I should have said trash can bangers there. So, the trash can bangers is Alex Bregman. Next for the A's is Matt Chapman. Obviously, Matt Olson's really good too, but Matt Chapman is the choice here for me. I think that's pretty obvious. Next for the Rangers, Joey Gallo. I don't think he has much competition for the best player on the team unless you want to go with Corey Kluber, which I don't know how he'll be after being injured for the whole 2019 season and didn't look good when he did pitch in 2019. Next for the Mariners, Daniel Vogelbach. I think this is also a pretty obvious choice. They don't really have any good players besides him. So that's the end of the video. If you like this kind of content on the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, so you will be one of the first ones to watch. Thank you for watching, and I will be back with more videos soon.